Good evening and welcome to the April 9th, 2025 Parks and Recreation Commission Special Hybrid Video Meeting. The time is now 5:01 p.m. My name is Peter Struck, Park and Recreation Commission Chair. Tonight's Park and Recreation Commission meeting is in person at the Mercer Island Community and Events Center, and we are also using video conferencing technology provided by Zoom. The Zoom video of this meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the city's YouTube channel later this week. Public audience members may be watching the meeting in person at the Mercer Island Community Event Center, by telephone, or online. Welcome to all, and thank you for joining us tonight. Commissioners, turn on your microphones, and will the city staff please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Hay, Commissioner Markson, Commissioner Cohen, Commissioner Westberg,
Here.
Commissioner McCarthy,
Here.
Vice Chair Burstein,
Here.
Chair Struck.
Here.
Thank you, Chair.
Now we will take a few moments to recognize Councilmember Jake Jacobson's contribution to the Mercer Island community. Councilmember Reynolds has a few words he'd like to say.
Thank you, Chair. Mercer Island experienced a great loss with the loss of the unfortunate passing of Councilmember Jacobson. He was an amazing individual, had quite an impressive life, which you can read about on the city webpage, starting with being a Navy veteran and a hero in the Vietnam War, a successful attorney, vice president of Osborne Construction, had a history of working to pass school bonds here on the island, and was elected to the city council with me in 2019. That's a life of many accomplishments that we can all aspire to. Jake is not somebody anybody would easily forget. He was lived larger than life and could be an important part of any room in which he was in. One thing that always impressed me about Jake was how connected he was to the community. He seemed to know everybody, and everybody seemed to know him. That showed up in a lot of ways, one of which was the very practical way that when he had his recent re-election bid, he won by a humongous margin. And I don't recall exactly what it was, but it was dramatic. And I think a big part of that is just that he is so well known and liked by so many in this community. It's no secret Jake and I didn't always agree on everything, but one thing we did agree on was, and that I admired about him, was he was 100% committed to doing what he thought was best for Mercer Island. And he was like a bulldog hanging on to any issue of things that he cared about. And there was a lot that he cared about, working on making sure the construction and other projects were managed efficiently and effectively on the island, making sure that YFS was protected, making sure that our city parks were protected. And many of you had a chance to work with him and saw that when he served as the liaison to the Parks and Rec Commission. Jake could be a bit curmudgeonly at times. I think everybody would concede that. He would probably concede that as well if he were here. But one thing I would say is that whenever we usually sat next to each other on the council dais, and whenever we came in, he would always greet me with a smile and a question about how things were going in my life and some story about what was going on in his. So he did really a fantastic job of separating his political beliefs from his personal beliefs, and really could be a friend and an ally to everyone. That was something I really admired. He was dedicated to making this city a better place, and I think we are a better place for having him here and for having him on the council. And I'll just note that I'll miss him, and I'm sure the community will miss him as well. And with that, I'll yield the floor. If anybody else has anything they would like to say, feel free to take a turn.
Thank you, Councilmember Reynolds. Any other commissioners have anything to say? Commissioner McCarthy.
Thank you. So Jake was my neighbor for a number of years, so I got to know him on a more personal level. And my biggest memory of Jake is that he's a doer, and I love that about him. And he definitely was a doer in our community, and we were so lucky to have him on our council and involved in Parks and Rec as he was. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? I'd just like to share first, Commissioner Cohen is not here tonight, but I know he sent an email extending his condolences and his appreciation for all of Jake's work. I've gotten to know Jake in a number of capacities, including when he was liaison with the Park and Recs Commission, as Councilmember Reynolds already mentioned, as well as I think has commented that he is a doer, and that is so true. We'll miss him greatly, and we really appreciate everything he has done for the community. And with that, we will go to appearances and city staff. Is there anyone that has signed up for appearances this evening?
No, Chair, there's not.
Thank you. The third item on the agenda is the Park Zone Development Discussion, and for that, we welcome our city manager, Jesse Bond.
All right, good evening, Parks and Rec Commission, Carson Hornsby, Management Analyst. Tonight, we're continuing the Park Zone discussion, and this is our last scheduled meeting to cover this topic. So by the end of the meeting, we're hoping to have a final recommendation approved by the PRC to pass along to the City Council and Planning Commission. There have been a couple next steps that have been addressed in the process here. The first of which is a council study session on April 15th. The goal here will be to brief the City Council on the Parks and Recreation Commission's Park Zone recommendation before it's transmitted to the Planning Commission. And then the handoff meeting for the Planning Commission will happen on April 23rd, where the chair and vice chair of the PRC will help us pass that recommendation off, and the Planning Commission will take up legislative review at that meeting. I think we'll reach out after the meeting to coordinate with chair and vice chair on those next steps. So look out for an email there. But before we get to those next steps, we have a recommendation to approve here at the meeting this evening. And we'll start off with our agenda, we'll start off with the development regulations. There have been a number of updates since the past meeting, and a number of other small updates that we'll cover. And then there's a new addition to your packet tonight, which is the draft land use map. We haven't talked about this in the Park Zone process quite yet, but you may recall the version that was adopted last year as part of the comprehensive plan and the open space zone work. So we'll talk about a couple more updates that need to happen to the land use map in order to adopt the Park Zone. And then lastly, the handoff memo has a number of changes that we talked about at the last meeting and other small revisions. So we will aim to finalize that at the end of the meeting. So starting off with the development regulations, the first item that changed was in the uses permitted section. We had discussed replacing the permitted use of the 3 Luther Burbank buildings of government services with a new definition for city government services. Essentially, this is the exact same definition, only it's geared specifically towards services provided by or on behalf of the city of Mercer Island. So the intent here is not for other levels of government to be operating in these buildings, just city services. And the intent of this change is to allow the current uses of these buildings to continue past the adoption of the Park Zone. So we're looking for consensus from the commission on this change.
Okay, thank you, Carson. Any questions on this topic? Okay, maybe just a thumbs up if you concur with the definition as it's been defined there. All right, we're good on that one.
Okay. All right, the next change is in the signs section. There was a question, I think, that came up in the Q&A matrix for the last meeting about a bill that was put into place last year that takes effect later this year. Essentially, this is House Bill 1293 that we're talking about. Essentially, it limits the city's ability to include subjective terms in their development code. And so when you look at a term like natural colors, it can be interpreted in different ways from different people. So unless you have a specific color palette or a list of colors, this is likely going to need to be replaced if we approve it. So the suggestion here is to remove this line that refers to natural colors from the draft.
Okay, again, any questions or comments on the suggestion to remove? Okay, thumbs up if you agree. All right, good with that one.
All right, building size standards are up next. You'll notice that we placed this section into a table, just so it's a little bit easier to read. We covered the different building types and gross floor area limits at the last meeting, other than this last new structure that was added to the list. And then the PRC asked for height limits for buildings. And so staff reviewed the tallest existing buildings in the park system, and Chair Struck, I believe you had a question about the buildings, the only question we received in the QA matrix this week. There is one larger building that we hadn't mentioned before or talked about in length. It's the bathroom / recycling center building at Mercerdale. This is about 19.5 feet tall. And then the second tallest building in the park zone or park system is the Homestead Park restroom at 18 feet. And so essentially the rationale of 20 feet is it gives us just a bit of design flexibility for existing buildings. And it's the next number up that's even and round. And so that's what we landed on here. So that explains the suggestion of 20-foot height limits. Then you'll see we added Luther Burbank pergola to the table. I'll skip ahead to the next slide just so we are all on the same page on what structure we're talking about. This is the walkway covering that extends from the parking lot to the administrative building at Luther Burbank Park. It's a unique structure in the park system. There's no other structure like it. I suppose it's kind of similar to picnic shelters, but doesn't really serve the same purpose. So this is unique, and there's not plans to add any more walkway coverings in the park system. And so this regulation is proposed to be specific to the covering at Luther Burbank. It's slightly under 2,000 square feet, and it's about 15 feet tall. And so we proposed 2,000 square feet as the gross floor area limit and a height limit of 16 feet. And then lastly, we added back in a sentence that was in prior drafts, but was removed at some point when we had a placeholder for the building section. This is a sentence that exempts flagpoles, antennas, chimneys, mechanical equipment, and rooftop appurtenances from height limits in the park zone. So we're looking for some consensus from the commission on the changes to the building section.
Okay, again, so the suggestion or recommendation is 20 feet for the height limit. They got that exemption in there for poles and so forth, and the square footage number. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, oh, excuse me. Councilmember Reynolds.
Can you just clarify for me what counts as an appurtenance? In particular, I'm curious, what a solar panel on a roof count as an appurtenance?
Yeah. Really, from my understanding, all of these things like antennas, chimneys, mechanical equipment, those are all rooftop appurtenances.
Okay.
So it's anything that extends from the roof that you wouldn't necessarily consider part of the roof itself.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, could I see a thumbs up if everybody's concurs with that? All right. Next topic.
All right, impervious surface is the next section that we have some changes in. The impervious surface standard prevents net new impervious surface from being added unless it's addressed by a number of exemptions. So the changes that we have in this section is to the list of exemptions here. The first one is on letter B. It was changed to ADA parking and accessibility. This is intended to line up with the text that precedes this section that it basically mentions anything that's a part of the city's ADA plan is exempt. And so this is sort of just for clarification that it's not just ADA parking, it's anything related to ADA accessibility that's a part of the ADA plan. The next change is on letter D. This said playgrounds before, and there was a discussion at the end of the last PRC meeting that talked about really what are the surfaces that we're referring to when we're talking about playgrounds. And so based on that discussion, we listened to the tape back and have proposed some new language here that says required surfaces for playground equipment. So this, I think, would include any of the materials for the fall zones on the playgrounds and just any surface below or around the playground that's required as part of the installation.
Okay, any questions or Commissioner Westberg?
I just have a comment back on B, ADA parking and accessibility, the way that's written, ADA and then capital P parking, it looks like accessibility is a different thing somehow. Maybe just a suggestion, change it to ADA small P parking and accessibility improvements or something like that, just to make it a little more clear.
Okay.
Is there agreement on that?
Thank you. So we've kind of an edit suggested by Commissioner Westberg on the ADA section. With that edit, is everybody good to go? Thumbs up on these two? Okay,
So ADA, small P parking and accessibility improvements. Okay. All right. Those were all the edits we had to the code. So next up is land use map. Again, this is a new addition to your packet. We had not discussed this as part of the park zone process, but staff reviewed the land use map that was adopted with the open space zone work last year and determined that there are a few changes that need to happen in order to adopt the park zone and make sure that the land use map and the zoning map are harmonized together. So before I get into the changes on the land use map, I just want to give a quick refresher on what the land use map is and how it differs from the zoning map. The land use map is part of the comprehensive plan. It's in the land use element or land use chapter of the comprehensive plan. And basically what it does is it provides a visual representation of land use designations within the city. And the zoning map builds off of that by zoning land into more specific zones with development regulations and more specific permitted uses. And so the relationship there is that the land use map sort of provides a foundation or a basis for the zoning map to work off of. So with that in mind, we have a couple proposed changes that are specific to the park zone and then a few other formatting type changes that are smaller. So the first one is a change to Southeast 28th Street Mini Park. This was missed as part of the work last year, and so we're proposing to change this from single-family residential to park. And then Rotary Park was inadvertently changed to open space last year when we meant to change it to park, and so we'd like to change that back.
I was wondering about that one. Thank you.
Yeah, so with this change, with those two changes, the zoning map and the land use map will be consistent with each other. And then we have a few other changes that I'll just run through really quickly, smaller changes. First of all, the title of the map was changed to City of Mercer Island Land Use Map. We've also removed the black diagonal lines from the open space properties in the legend and on the map. What I'm talking about is that you may recall seeing them in the current zoning map. Basically, it's just a way to call attention to land that is changing in some way or in these draft versions. So that's not proposed to move on into the final draft. We've also alphabetized the legend. We changed some text under the legend to refer to land use map instead of land use plan. It's just some terminology that was used in the past. And then lastly, we removed the park and open space labels from the map. Basically what I'm referring to here is that you still see two labels for Rotary Park and Southeast 28th Street Mini Park. It's not necessary to include in the final version. Like for instance, you wouldn't label City Hall or other city properties. So those will be removed. The text boxes will be removed in the arrows, and then that'll be the final version. So that is a summary of the changes that are proposed to happen to the land use map. So we'll open it up for discussion.
Any questions or comments on the land, Vice Chair Burstein?
Quick question, are the maps geographically accurate? So, looking at Island Crest Park in the open space, would that be related to the GIS system, or would it have to still be surveyed?
It is based on GIS data. GIS put these maps together for us, so it's consistent with what GIS has on file.
Okay, so no additional surveying of that property to move it to open space is required.
No, there hasn't been a survey of any of these properties as part of this process.
Okay, thank you.
All right, seeing, oh, so, gotta keep looking to the right. Thank you.
Sorry.
Councilmember Reynolds.
I'm not a real member here, so it's understandable. You don't
okay,
look my
no.
direction. This is perhaps slightly off topic, but I'm just curious on the land use map in the agenda packet. It says the city limits are contiguous with the Mercer Island, Lake Washington shoreline. It's something I've always wondered about, and I know the web is not necessarily a reliable source, but if you Google it right now and ask for square miles, it says land 6.38 square miles, water 6.5 square miles. So apparently at least some sources consider us as owning part of the water too. What's the distinction and what is our connection to that, if anything, or is it just wrong?
I'm not able to answer that question tonight. I'm sorry.
Quite all right. We'll catch
And
you another time.
it
Jason.
varies. I mean, some areas, we typically, in terms of our regulatory authority, we're out into the lake so many feet. But actual ownership varies around the island, and I'm not able to answer that on the spot.
Probably not necessary to have right now.
Okay, so Carson's gone through the changes on the draft land use map. Seeing no further questions or comments, thumbs up if you concur. All right, moving forward.
Okay. All right, the last thing that we have to talk about is the handoff memo. Just a couple changes that were identified at the last meeting. These are to the additional recommendations section. The PRC had asked for some additional context on the recommendation to subdivide Island Crest Park. And then we had also discussed another recommendation to include a goal in the city's long-term facilities plans to remove government services from the Luther Burbank buildings. And so we've put some new text into the draft handoff memo, and rather than run through this in the slides, I figured we'll just pull up the handoff memo and just run through all the changes like that. So give me one moment to bring this up on screen, please. All right, so we'll fill in this date. Another change here is that this memo is going to be addressed to both the city council and the planning commission. So city council will be added here in the to section, and then wherever else it says planning commission, we'll add in city council as well. The subject was changed to include the zoning map and the land use map as well. And then a few other small changes here in wording in the introduction section. So I'll just go ahead and pause there in case there's any comments or anything.
No.
Okay. Again, another date for tonight's meeting. So if we pass this recommendation, we'll fill that in as well. Couple edits. We took this sentence out here because the next sentence refers to the development regulations. So it's kind of just a double wording there. We added city government services to uses permitted to update that with the new definition. In all of these sections that outline the uses permitted, we included a few examples. So we added a couple examples to the recreational uses, which include things like sports, cycling, and use of community gardens, just to give some context on what we're talking about. The title of recreation facilities or recreational facilities added amenities as well, as that's the terminology that's used in the code. We also added in some examples of park maintenance facilities, and then the section on city government services is all new because that was added to the draft before the last meeting. So essentially, this just outlines the uses of the three Luther Burbank buildings. It mentions that there's a new definition proposed for city government services, and that the intent here is to allow the uses of those buildings to continue past the adoption of the park zone. And then we've also referenced the new recommendation that we'll cover later to remove city government services from these buildings in the city's long-term facilities plans.
Okay. Did you want to cover on page 5, the building size, that addition, or?
Yeah,
Oh, okay. I just didn't. Or I guess it's starting.
all right. Before that section, we also have a few changes to signs, scoreboards, and kiosks.
Yep.
We removed natural colors, as that was also removed from the code. We added some context on the size of the scoreboard because we used the model at Island Crest Park as the reference for this regulation. And then the kiosk model is based on the kiosk at Luther Burbank Park. It's also the same as Pioneer Park as well. So just thought it would help to add that context into the draft. And then the building size standards, as we talked about earlier in the presentation, we added this section into a table, and the different buildings are listed in the table with gross floor area limits and height limits. And this section lines up with the version that was just approved a few minutes ago. So the second paragraph here also talks about the picnic shelters and the limits that we covered for that structure or type of structure, and then also the limits for the Luther Burbank Park pergola or covered walkway. And then to end off this section, we talked about the 4 different exemptions to the building size standards, which include the Luther Burbank Administrative Building, Boiler Building, Caretaker's House, and Emergency Well Buildings, as they are considered utilities. Did you want to pause there?
Yeah, is there any? Commissioner Westberg?
No, all the information's there. I was just wondering whether for presentation purposes, it might be easier to put the table in the memo where all the information is very clearly displayed and delineated. It allows you to visualize very quickly to me what the limits are that we're proposing.
We can definitely add that in there.
Okay, the suggestion under building size is to put the table in that was shown on the screen earlier as opposed to the verbiage. Everybody okay with that? Well, just thought, well. Okay, a thumbs up if you want to go with that thought. We're good. Good thought.
Okay.
So pervious surface.
Yep, impervious surface is next. These 2 edits are pretty much word for word the 2 changes that we talked about earlier, though we'll change, we'll add in accessibility improvements here. And then there's required surfaces for playground equipment. And then in the definitions, we added the new definition for city government services. Just a small edit here on the zoning map section to reference development regulations. And then the section for the land use map is completely new, as we haven't covered that before, and it just summarizes the different changes that we talked about earlier in the meeting. So the change to Southeast 28th Street Mini Park from single family residential to park, Rotary Park from open space to park, and then the other smaller formatting and style type changes. And then moving on to additional recommendations, we added or changed the recommendation for Island Crest Park. I'll go ahead and just read it. The PRC had several discussions on critical and forested areas, e.g. open space land in the park system that focused on preserving green space. The forested area of Island Crest Park is a unique example of open space land within a developed park due to its large size and location adjacent to the park boundary. This area of Island Crest Park bears a closer resemblance to parcels designated as open space in comparison to parkland. The city council should consider subdividing Island Crest Park to create separate parcels for the open space and active use areas and rezoning the open space parcel to open space. And Chair, I believe you had a suggestion on this.
Yeah, so, and as I've kind of thought about it here tonight, I'm perhaps not as adamant about it, but let me just read what I thought. So in the last sentence of that second bullet where it starts out the city council, it would be prefaced by, in keeping with the principle of aligning the zoning designation to the land's primary use, comma, then the city council should consider blah, blah, blah. Because I think it's this principle of saying, well, what's the primary use of the property or the land? And then that should, generally govern the zoning. So like earlier in this document, we talk about for utilities, those parks, if you will, they're going to be, zoned for utility use. Same thing with Aubrey Davis. The primary purpose of Aubrey Davis is transportation related, even though many would consider it a park. And so that's why we kept it with PI as opposed to switching it to parks or something else. So that was kind of my thought process of just kind of bringing in that concept of designating or splitting the designation based on the primary use of the land. What's that? Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner McCarthy.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that makes sense, Peter. I also wanted to just call out, it says location adjacent to the park boundary, but it actually is part of the park. So I feel like that second part, developed park due to its large size and location adjacent to the park boundary, I feel like that needs to be adjusted slightly because it's like its own defined space within the park. It's not adjacent to the park boundary. It's just its own defined space within Island Crest. Does that make sense?
It does. We could also say something like it shares the park boundary, or.
Yeah, just something to say that it's its own space beside the developed part of the park is what I'm getting at.
Part of the reason we're referencing the park boundary is just because it's on the park boundary, the Luther Burbank, you can't make the same recommendation because the open space areas are intertwined.
Exactly. No, that's exactly what I mean. Like but it's not adjacent to the park boundary. It's its own unique parcel inside the park that is specifically could be developed. That's what I'm saying. So adjacent to the developed part of the park or separate from the developed part, it isn't intertwined. Rory, do you have any suggestions? You're a better wordsmith than I am.
No pressure.
No, I think you're on target. I think your point is well taken, that it is part of Island Crest Park. It's just an undeveloped part that is currently dedicated to open space.
Chair Struck, our
Yeah, I was gonna say.
attorney is going to save us
yes,
from ourselves.
Yes.
No, I was just wondering if we said on the park boundary, would that be enough of a change?
But it's not on the park boundary, though. That's the whole point. It's like its own defined space beside the developed part of the park.
That makes it sound like it's not part of the park.
How about if we just cut off the sentence right after within a developed park?
So
We do it size, yeah.
I just want to try to say this one more time, and I'm not sure I think we're talking past each other.
Maybe, yeah.
Phrase location adjacent to the park boundary is significant to this discussion. I think it has, adjacent to the park boundary has to stay in there, because what we're saying is there's a portion of this park that sits on the boundary line and it can be subdivided, right? That's the point. It's big enough that it could be subdivided, and it's on like the outside of the park, or it's on the boundary line. If this open space area sat in the middle of the park, we can't subdivide it. So if anybody has better language.
I see what you're saying. You're saying that it's on the edge of the park boundary, I'm thinking of the middle of the park where
How about we say
it's
some,
touching the ball fields, for example.
how about we say something like adjacent to the developed zone of the park? There is no boundary there, but there is a sort of a informal demarcation line of separating the developed part of the park and the open space part of the park. So you could say the developed zone of the park, something like that. That's my best try at wordsmithing, Jody.
Thank you.
Yeah, Councilmember Reynolds.
I wonder if I'm understanding everybody's intent. To me, it would be a little more clear if it's, instead of saying adjacent to, it said abutting.
Yeah.
Sure, you can say abutting, but why do you not want to put in the developed area? That's the only thing that I'm just curious about.
Yeah, we're trying to just make the point that the area of open space sits on the park boundary. And because of where it's located in this park, it can be subdivided. So the fact that it's on the outside of the park matters.
Mhm.
I'm trying to come
Yeah,
up.
okay, yeah, I just think that you're talking about the like edge that's on the street that's not Island Crest, and I'm thinking of the edge that's in the middle by the baseball field parking lot.
The edge in the middle doesn't matter to me to subdivision. Yeah.
Got it.
It's
Okay.
the fact
Yep.
that it sits on the outside.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, totally. That's what was confusing me, is I was thinking of in the middle.
So we can actually carve this out. If the council wants to invest in this work.
Yeah.
It can be done. It can't be done in our other parks.
Got it. I understand. Thank you.
I understand why we're tripping over it though, so we'll have to figure out how to better explain it, but.
Yeah, we'll be ready for that question. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jody. Okay, so we have that one cleared up, I believe. But going back to, I guess, to my suggestion of, in that last sentence before the city council saying, in keeping with the principle of aligning the zoning designation to land's primary use, blah, blah, blah. There you go. And I think principle is PLE, not PAL. There you go.
Thank you.
Everybody good with that? All right, thank you.
Trying to figure out if I typed this out correctly or if it sounds.
In keeping with the principle of aligning the zoning designation to the land's principal primary use. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, and then the last additional recommendation is for the city to remove government services from the Luther Burbank buildings. So just reading it out loud, the Luther Burbank Administrative Building, Boiler Building, and Caretaker's House are unique buildings in the park system because they are much larger than other park facilities and they serve non-recreational purposes. The city's long-term facilities plans should include a goal to relocate city government services from these three buildings so that all facilities in the park zone are dedicated to serving parks and recreation purposes.
Any comments or questions on that? Commissioner Westberg.
Just one comment. I want to make sure with this that we are not saying that we would remove park and recreation administrative services from those buildings. I don't think that was the intent, but those buildings have long been used for administration of the park system per se, and that is a city service. I just wanted to make sure that we're all clear. We're all clear on that.
Well, I think it's clear. It says here at the end are dedicated to serving parks and recreation purposes. I would think that, admin activities would fall under that wording.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, everybody good with that? All right. We're good on that one as well.
Okay. And then just a quick change to the conclusion to mention development regulations, zoning map, and land use map. And then again, we didn't cover this all throughout the memo, but since it's going to be addressed to both the planning commission and the city council, in situations where we just mentioned planning commission, we'll add in city council as well.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, so just going back to this, this suggestion here.
Yeah.
Should it say, instead of land use designation to primary land use, should it say aligning the zoning code to the primary land use?
Oh,
Or-
yeah, sorry. It was zoning, sorry. Zoning designation, not land use. Aligning the zoning designation to the primary land use. Thank you for catching
Okay.
that. Yeah.
I knew something sounded off
Yeah.
for a second there, so I was trying to figure out what it was. All right,
All right,
okay.
we're good.
All right, I think that's it. Is there a need to, so we'll make a motion, but like small formatting changes, should it's largely in the format provided, so, okay. So there are a couple of proposed motions
Right.
at the end. Yeah.
And I think the suggestion will be to treat each motion separately.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I'll read the first motion and then I'll be asking for first and a second on that. So approve the draft park zone development regulations, draft zoning map, and draft land use map in substantially the form provided to submit to the planning commission for consideration during the legislative review process. Somebody wish to make that motion? Commissioner, thank you, Commissioner Westberg. A second?
Second, Jody McCarthy.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner McCarthy. Any further discussion? Vice Chair,
Just one point, I think the motion should be amended to include the city council.
uh,
Can you repeat that?
I think in the, where it says here, submitted to the planning commission, I think Vice Chair is saying, should it, we also include city council?
That's
Because what I understood from what Carson was saying is in the memo, we're presenting this to both. And in fact, I believe we'll talk to the city council before the planning commission.
correct. We were actually just huddling on that very thing when you ask that question. Yes, I would recommend adding in, city council.
Okay. All right, so we will amend the motion to include the city council, and we'll let you do the wordsmithing on that. Okay, so we've got
I still so move.
so moving and a second. Second from Commissioner McCarthy. All right. Ready to vote? So city staff, you want to call the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner McCarthy,
Aye.
Commissioner Westberg,
I,
Commissioner Markson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Burstein,
Aye.
Chair Struck.
Aye.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. The motion is approved as amended. So the second motion is to approve the handoff memo and authorize the chair and vice chair of the PRC to present the recommendation to both the city council and the planning commission. Do I have a motion on that?
I'm motion to approve.
Okay, we have the motion from Commissioner Markson. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner McCarthy. We have a first motion, a second. Any final comments before we move to vote? Okay. Commissioners, please turn on your microphones, and will city staff please conduct a roll call?
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Westberg,
I,
Vice Chair Burstein,
Aye.
Commissioner McCarthy,
Aye.
Chair Struck,
Aye.
Commissioner Markson.
Aye.
Thank you, Chair.
So that motion passes as well. And we'll put a bow on that one. And I want to thank all the city staff, especially Carson, for all the hard work over the last several months, several meetings. So. Now I'll get a chance to hear what the city council has to say about it. So our last item of business is absences and commissioner reports. So this evening, we've got absences from Commissioner Hay and Commissioner Cone, excuse me. And may I have a motion to excuse their absence?
I so move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner McCarthy seconds. And I think we need to have another roll call on that on as well.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner McCarthy,
Aye.
Commissioner Westberg,
I,
Vice Chair Burstein,
Aye.
Commissioner Markson,
Aye.
Chair Struck.
Aye.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now regarding commissioner reports, anything to report that you wish to have recorded? All right. Seeing none, we will go to the next Park and Recreation Commission meeting is a regular meeting scheduled for May 1st, 2025 at 5 p.m. The time now is 5:49 p.m. and the meeting is adjourned. However, as a reminder to commissioners, please stay seated until the city staff has terminated the Zoom broadcast. Good evening and thank you for joining us again tonight.